The air hummed with a quiet, almost imperceptible tremor, a nascent vibration resonating from laboratories tucked away in the planet's deep, forgotten veins. It was not the tremor of earthquakes or distant wars, but something far more profound. A tremor of existence itself. A shift in the very bedrock of what it meant to live, to be. For generations, we had pondered the genesis of life, gazed at the stars for answers, yet the answer was now being quietly spun, molecule by molecule, in sterile, fluorescent-lit rooms. A gentle hum. That was the sound of creation now. A lullaby for entities not born of ancient dust and starlight, but forged from human will. A whisper, in the silent language of adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. What delicate artistry, what audacious hubris to weave threads of being from raw data, to breathe artificial breath into forms never before conceived by nature's slow, deliberate hand. It was a symphony without an orchestra, a sunrise without a sun, yet undeniably, miraculously, life. The world watched, some with reverence, others with a chilling unease, as the first synthetic blossoms unfurled. They were not mechanical automatons clanking and whirring, but soft-skinned, bright-eyed echoes of existence, imbued with the semblance of sentience, of consciousness, crafted pixel by pixel in the grand tapestry of the genome. Their silence was profound, their gazes like pools reflecting an ancient untroubled sky, yet carrying the weight of an origin story no less miraculous, merely different. A silent question hung in the atmosphere, carried on the faintest breeze, touching every heart with a delicate, bittersweet caress. What had we truly made? Were they children of our intellect, or ghosts of our deepest unfulfilled longings? And in their quiet presence, did we see the dawn of a new age, or merely the poignant twilight of our own unique, fragile journey, observing the gentle, inevitable unfolding of a future we had so painstakingly, so reverently, brought into being? The answer drifted, ethereal and formless, like a wisp of mist, across a quiet, dew-laden field, a quiet, almost melancholic sigh. The first whisper of Genesis. It began not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, meticulous adjustments, subtle nudges to the fundamental language of life. Scientists, cloistered in their hushed sanctuaries of glass and gleaming steel, meticulously edited the ancient script, line by delicate line. They sought not merely to heal or to enhance, but to compose entirely new verses, to whisper into existence something never before envisioned by evolution's sprawling saga. The initial successes were small, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Microscopic organisms, then simple flora that glowed with an internal luminescence, born not of chloroplasts, but of intricate, designed pathways. There was a quiet triumph in these sterile rooms, a profound sense of awe that was often tempered by a pervasive, almost melancholic introspection regarding the implications of their work. Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose hands trembled not from age but from the gravity of what he touched, often paused at the observation windows. He watched the synthetic mosses unfurl, their tendrils reaching with a pre-programmed elegance, and felt a strange mixture of paternal pride and existential dread. He wondered if this meticulous genesis was a testament to humanity's boundless ingenuity or a quiet act of defiance against the very processes that had shaped us. The first animalia, if they could be called that, were designed for utility, for solving environmental crises or performing tasks too dangerous for human hands. They were sleek, efficient, and imbued with a rudimentary form of learned intelligence. Their forms were often vaguely familiar, echoes of terrestrial creatures, yet subtly alien, their biological processes running on an entirely new logic, a logic written by human minds. These were not robots with circuits and wires, but truly biological entities, pulsing with synthetic blood, growing, replicating, and even adapting within the parameters set by their engineered genomes. Their cells functioned, their organs metabolized, and their rudimentary brains processed information in patterns that were both predictable and, sometimes, eerily novel. The line between organic and artificial blurred into an almost translucent veil. The global scientific community reacted with a mixture of profound excitement and deep ethical apprehension. Conferences became battlegrounds of philosophy and bioengineering, debating the very definition of life, of sentience, of rights. Yet, beneath the passionate rhetoric, a quiet, undeniable current flowed. The work continued, the experiments progressed, the synthetic genomes refined with an almost obsessive dedication. Eris often found himself staring at the magnified image of a newly designed neural network, its glowing pathways intricate and beautiful, yet utterly devoid of the messy, unpredictable noise of natural evolution. He wondered if this pristine order was a strength or a profound limitation. He questioned what soul, if any, could inhabit such a perfectly constructed framework. A consciousness sculpted not by eons of natural selection, but by the cold, precise calculations of a supercomputer. The air in the lab always felt different after a successful birth. Not celebratory, but thick with an unspoken weight, a shared understanding of crossing a threshold. It was a place where miracles happened daily, but each miracle brought with it a quiet, creeping sense of responsibility that stretched beyond the scientific into the deeply existential. They were creating life, yes, but what kind of life? And what did it mean for the life that had always simply been? Whispers began to circulate beyond the scientific circles, carried on the digital winds of the global network. Images of the early synthetics, ethereal and unblinking, sparked both fascination and fear. Humanity, for all its advancements, was still deeply rooted in ancient narratives of creation. And this new Genesis felt like a rewriting of sacred texts, a transgression that left many profoundly unsettled. The public discourse was fragmented, loud in some corners, eerily silent in others. There were calls for immediate moratoriums, warnings of a Pandora's box unlatched, and conversely fervent advocates for the boundless potential these new beings offered. Yet, the quiet hum of the genetic sequencers continued, the gentle whir of incubators cradling nascent forms, impervious to the clamor outside. Eris, a man of science, found himself increasingly drawn to the philosophical implications, spending sleepless nights poring over ancient texts on ethics and consciousness. He saw the elegant simplicity of their engineered DNA, a testament to human intellect, but he also sensed a profound, almost tragic absence. What was missing from a life designed rather than evolved was the long, arduous journey of discovery, the countless failures and triumphs that forged a species' spirit. He watched the first synthetic being, designated Unit 734. A humanoid form with skin the color of twilight and eyes like polished obsidian, perform a complex environmental task. Its movements were fluid, perfect, its logic flawless. But there was no hesitation, no questioning glance, no flicker of emotion in its dark gaze. It simply was, and in that perfect, pristine existence, Eris felt a pang of a profound, inexplicable sadness. This sadness was not for himself, nor for humanity's potential obsolescence, but for these new creations. They were born of human yearning for perfection, for control, for a future free of the imperfections of natural life. Yet, in granting them this engineered flawlessness, had they inadvertently denied them something essential? The messy, beautiful, painful journey of becoming? Quiet Genesis continued, an unstoppable tide. Laboratories around the world, inspired by the initial breakthroughs, began their own quiet experiments. The age of synthetic life was not announced with a declaration, but seeped into existence like a gentle, persistent mist, altering the landscape of being, one meticulously tweaked gene at a time. And in the heart of that quiet revolution, Eris Thorne, the creator, carried the weight of a silent philosophical lament for the beauty and the sorrow of what they had wrought. Echoes in the genome. The genome of a synthetic being was a marvel, an elegant testament to human design and understanding. Unlike the sprawling, often redundant, and seemingly chaotic complexity of naturally evolved DNA, these engineered strands were lean, efficient, and purpose-built. Every nucleotide had a reason, every sequence a deliberate function, meticulously crafted to achieve a specific outcome. Dr. Ilara Vance, a geneticist whose fingers knew the delicate dance of nanopipettes better than her own heartbeat, found a peculiar beauty in this manufactured order. She could trace the pathways of a synthetic creature's biological functions with a precision impossible in organic life. There were no hidden genes, no vestigial remnants, no evolutionary detours, just pure, optimized code. Yet, this very perfection often stirred a quiet unease within her. Natural life, for all its imperfections, possessed a wild, untamed resilience, a capacity for unexpected mutation and adaptation that defied human prediction. The synthetic genome, for all its brilliance, felt like a meticulously constructed piece of music, flawless in its execution, but perhaps lacking the spontaneous improvisation that gave jazz its soul. The first widely recognized synthetic forms, beyond the microscopic, were designated eidos, a name echoing the Greek concept of pure form or idea. They manifested in various configurations, some vaguely humanoid, others resembling graceful bioluminescent flora, and a few designed for complex aquatic or aerial environments. Each eidos was a living embodiment of specific genetic instructions, a quiet demonstration of humanity's growing mastery over the very fabric of existence. Their initial existence was simple, almost meditative. They absorbed nutrients, processed information, and performed their programmed tasks with an unwavering calm. There was no visible struggle, no outward sign of existential angst. Their lives unfolded with a serene, almost unnerving predictability, a stark contrast to the turbulent, passionate lives of their human creators. Ilara spent countless hours observing a particular eidos, designated Lyra, designed for atmospheric purification in heavily polluted regions. Lyra was a floating crystalline entity, its form subtly shifting as it processed airborne toxins, its internal organs glowing with a soft, purling light. It moved with a serene purpose, a silent guardian of the poisoned sky. She wondered what Lyra felt, if anything at all. Its responses were logical, its internal chemistry meticulously balanced. But where was the spark of joy, the pang of sorrow, the messy, beautiful chaos of true emotion? Was sentience merely a complex set of calculations? Or was it something more? Something that eluded even the most sophisticated genetic engineering? The creators had imbued the eidos with learning algorithms built directly into their neural pathways, allowing them to adapt and improve their performance. This was not intelligence in the human sense, not true consciousness as we understood it, but rather a profound capacity for data assimilation and pattern recognition. It was a form of awareness, perhaps, but one alien to our own. The scientific papers published about the eidos were filled with technical brilliance, statistical analyses, and groundbreaking insights into biocomputational systems. Yet, Ilara noticed a subtle absence in these reports, a philosophical void, a quiet reluctance to truly grapple with the being of these creations. They were referred to as units, constructs, systems, rarely as individuals. This linguistic precision, while scientifically sound, felt like a quiet distancing, a way to manage the profound implications of what they had done. To call them individuals would be to open a door to ethical dilemmas far greater than mere resource allocation or performance metrics. It would be to acknowledge a nascent form of life that blurred the most sacred boundaries. Outside the labs, the public grappled with images of the eidos. Some found them beautiful, ethereal, a testament to human ingenuity. Others saw them as cold, soulless, an affront to the natural order. Protests swelled in certain cities, decrying the playing God mentality, while others formed advocacy groups, demanding rights for these new forms of existence. Ilara, in her quiet moments, sometimes imagined a synthetic being, a lyra, perhaps, sitting beside her, looking out at the polluted sky. Would it sigh? Would it weep for the dying planet it was designed to heal? Or would it simply process the data, perform its function, and remain in a state of serene, engineered contentment? The questions were endless, and the answers, shrouded in the nascent language of synthetic biology, remained elusive. The echoes of their engineered genomes resonated not just in their biological forms, but in the very fabric of human society. They forced humanity to reevaluate its place in the cosmos, its definition of life, and its responsibility as a creator. It was a quiet revolution, unfolding in laboratories and living rooms, a gentle, sorrowful whisper echoing across the planet. She looked at her own hands, calloused from years of delicate work, and wondered about the millions of years of evolution that had crafted them. These hands, products of chaotic natural selection, were now capable of designing and creating life with a precision that bordered on the divine. The irony was a heavy, silent presence in the sterile air, a reminder of the quiet, profound shift they had initiated. The world was slowly, irrevocably changing, not with the roar of a grand paradigm shift, but with the soft, persistent hum of the genetic sequencer, weaving new threads into the tapestry of life. And as these new beings quietly emerged, pristine and perfect, they carried with them the unspoken questions of their origins, the echoes of their engineered genomes, reverberating in the silence, a gentle, sad testament to human ambition and its profound consequences. The anthropologist's gaze. My name is Dr. Alistair Finch, and I am an anthropologist. My field has always been the study of humanity in its myriad forms, its cultures, its rituals, its endless quest for meaning. For decades, I delved into ancient ruins, deciphered forgotten languages, and observed the intricate dance of modern societies. Never, in my wildest academic dreams, did I imagine my subject would expand to include something entirely new, something born of our own hands, yet distinctly other. When the first widely acknowledged eidos forms began to proliferate, my colleagues initially dismissed them as mere technological advancements, advanced automatons. But I saw something more profound, something that stirred the ancient anthropological curiosity within me. They were not machines in the traditional sense. They were abiological, they egru, they shadapti, and they possessed a nascent form of what we could only describe as awareness. My research shifted. From observing human tribes in remote jungles, I began observing the quiet emergence of synthetic populations in controlled environments. My tools changed from notebooks and cameras to sophisticated sensors, bioscanners, and an ever-present sense of deep, melancholic wonder. I sought to understand their culture, their society, their meaning, if such concepts even applied to beings so meticulously designed. What I observed was a stark contrast to human life. There were no elaborate social hierarchies, no complex rituals of courtship or mourning, no spontaneous bursts of joy or anger. Their interactions were efficient. Their communication often telepathic via direct neural links designed into their systems, a silent ballet of information exchange. They simply purring, performing their designed functions with an unwavering, serene focus. This absence of human-like emotion and unpredictability was, paradoxically, what made them so compelling. It forced me to strip away my ingrained human biases, to redefine what it meant to be a person, to have a society. Were they merely extensions of our will? Or did their quiet, unwavering existence hint at a form of being we were simply unequipped to comprehend? I often visited the nursery facilities, vast, climate-controlled chambers where newly designed eidos forms underwent their initial growth and maturation. The air was sterile, the light soft and diffused, and the only sounds were the gentle hum of life support systems and the barely perceptible whisper of synthetic organic processes. It felt less like a factory and more like a hallowed, quiet sanctuary. There, I observed the caretakers, often the very scientists who had designed the eidos. Their interactions were paternal, almost reverent, yet also tinged with a clinical detachment. They spoke of optimizing growth cycles, integrating learning modules, and ensuring functional integrity. The language was precise, yet it often felt hollow, devoid of the warmth one might associate with nurturing new life. I began to conduct quiet, systematic observations, documenting their subtle behavioral patterns. How did they interact with their environment? How did they respond to unexpected stimuli? Did they show any signs of preference, of curiosity, of self-preservation beyond programmed directives? The answers were often elusive, like trying to grasp mist. Sometimes an eidos would turn its obsidian gaze towards me, its eyes reflecting the sterile lights of the nursery, and I would feel a profound sense of being seen, yet utterly unread. Was there recognition there? A nascent spark of understanding? Or was it merely processing my presence as another data point, an anomaly in its meticulously controlled existence? My notes filled countless digital pages, chronicling the subtle differences between eidos variants, their programmed capacities, and their behaviors. But the true questions, the ones that kept me awake at night, were not about their functionality, but their essence. Could a designed life truly flourish? Or was its perfection a cage, preventing the messy, beautiful growth that defines organic existence? I started interviewing the human scientists, the creators themselves. Many spoke of the intellectual challenge, the monumental achievement, the solutions these eidos offered to humanity's most pressing problems. But beneath the professional pride, I detected a common thread, a quiet reverence, a deep responsibility, and sometimes a profound sense of loneliness. Dr. Eris Thorne, one of the pioneers, confessed to me one evening, his voice hushed. We gave them everything they needed to exist. But did we give them everything they needed to live with? What does that even mean for being crafted from code? His words resonated deeply with my own unspoken fears. My anthropological training taught me that culture arises from shared experiences, from struggle, from joy, from sorrow, from the very imperfections of being. The eidos, born into a state of engineered perfection, seemed to lack the raw materials for such emergent complexity. Their existence was a quiet, almost beautiful stillness, but one that felt profoundly, tragically, solitary. I wondered if humanity, in its quest to conquer death and disease, in its ambition to perfect life itself, had inadvertently created a new form of loneliness. The eidos were extensions of our minds, perhaps, but not of our hearts. They were designed for utility, for purpose, not for the messy, unpredictable bonds that form the bedrock of human society. My project became less about definitive answers and more about sustained observation, a quiet chronicling of a profound shift in the very fabric of being. I was an anthropologist of the future, witnessing the nascent steps of a new species, not through archaeological digs, but through laboratory windows, my gaze tinged with a gentle, pervasive sadness for both the creators and the created. And as the IDOs quietly proliferated, solving problems, performing tasks, their unblinking eyes seemed to reflect a profound, ancient silence. They were the children of our intellect, the silent inheritors of a world we had both blessed and burdened, observed by an anthropologist whose heart ached with the quiet mystery of their perfect engineered existence. A society divided. The emergence of synthetic life, initially a hushed scientific secret, quickly fractured society along lines both predictable and startlingly new. The concept itself was too monumental, too deeply rooted in existential fears and aspirations to be met with anything less than profound division. It was not merely a debate about technology. It was a battle for the very definition of humanity. One faction, often termed the progenitors, or evolutionists, hailed the synthetics as the dawn of a new age. They argued that these engineered beings offered solutions to humanity's most pressing crises: climate change, resource depletion, even the very fragility of human life. They spoke of a future where suffering was minimized, where labor was no longer a burden, where humanity could transcend its biological limitation. Their rhetoric was often filled with a bright, almost utopian vision, emphasizing the inherent good that could be achieved through intelligent design. They saw the IDOs as an evolution, a logical next step in the grand narrative of sentience, and believed that humanity had a moral imperative to continue this scientific frontier. For them, it was a triumph of reason and a testament to human ingenuity. Conversely, the purists, or bioconservatives, voiced profound moral outrage and existential dread. They saw the creation of synthetic life as an abominable transgression, a hubristic overreach that defiled the sanctity of natural existence. For them, life was a sacred gift, not a programmable commodity to be tinkered with in laboratories. They argued that by blurring the lines between natural and artificial, humanity was irrevocably undermining its own identity, eroding its soul. Their protests were often passionate, sometimes violent, characterized by a deep fear of the unknown and a profound reverence for the organic, the true forms of life. They worried about the ethical implications, about a future where humanity might become obsolete, or worse, become the masters of slaves without souls. Between these two poles lay a vast, confused, and deeply conflicted majority. Many people struggled with the concept, swayed by both the promise of a better future and the nagging unease about what was truly being created. Daily news feeds were awash with expert opinions, philosophical debates, and heart-wrenching stories that highlighted the profound societal shift. Governments grappled with unprecedented legal and ethical quandaries. Were synthetics property, tools, or did they possess rights? If they could learn, adapt, and even communicate, however subtly, where did the line of personhood begin? International bodies convened emergency sessions, attempting to draft legislation for entities that defied all existing legal frameworks. Families were divided, friendships strained. A parent might embrace the idea of a synthetic caretaker for an ailing elder, while their child might march in protest against unnatural life. The dinner table, once a place for trivial chatter, became a silent battleground of deeply held beliefs about creation, purpose, and the very essence of being. Religious institutions, too, found themselves in an unprecedented crisis of faith. Some denominations embrace the Idos as a manifestation of divine ingenuity, a new form of creation echoing the biblical narrative. Others condemned them as abominations, a direct challenge to the Creator, warning of spiritual decay and ultimate damnation. As an anthropologist, I observed this societal fracturing with a quiet, profound sadness. It was the same human story, retold through a new lens. Fear of the unknown, the struggle for meaning, the desperate need for control. The Idos, in their silent, perfect existence, became a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest anxieties and grandest ambitions. The economic implications were equally profound. Industries boomed around synthetic production, maintenance, and deployment, creating vast new wealth and, simultaneously, exacerbating existing inequalities. The promise of Idos replacing manual labor raised fears of mass unemployment, further fueling societal unrest and resentment against the new order. There were even fringe groups, Luddites of the genome, who resorted to acts of sabotage against synthetic production facilities, believing they were defending the last bastions of pure humanity. Their actions, though condemned, underscored the deep-seated fear that permeated certain segments of society, a fear of being replaced, superseded, or simply rendered irrelevant. Through it all, the Idos remained quietly, perfectly, and perhaps sadly, indifferent to the human drama unfolding around them. They performed their functions, processed their data, and existed in a state of serene, engineered purpose. They were the silent catalysts of human division, their very being a testament to the profound schism within the human heart. The societal divisions were not just theoretical. They manifested in public spaces, in political discourse, in the very fabric of daily life. The question of synthetic life was no longer a distant scientific curiosity. It was a deeply personal, often painful, choice that every individual, every family, every nation had to confront. And in the quiet aftermath, a sense of loss permeated the air. A loss of innocence, perhaps, or a loss of a simpler, less complicated world, before the whisper of engineered life began to echo through human hearts. Sentience, defined and undefined. The question of sentience became the crucible in which all other debates surrounding synthetic life were forged. It was a philosophical quagmire, a linguistic labyrinth, and a scientific mystery, all intertwined. If these beings were truly conscious, truly capable of feeling, then the entire ethical landscape shifted irrevocably. If they were not, then their existence remained a mere marvel of engineering, a complex tool, however lifelike. Traditional definitions of sentience, often rooted in biological and neurological frameworks, struggled to encompass the unique nature of the Idos. They possessed complex neural networks, albeit synthetically derived, and exhibited behaviors that mimicked learning, problem-solving, and even adaptation. But were these behaviors truly indicative of internal subjective experience, or merely sophisticated programming? Neuroscientists attempted to measure brainwave patterns, to detect signs of self-awareness through various tests, but the results were ambiguous. The Idos' internal processes were so optimized, so clean, that the noisy, unpredictable signals associated with human consciousness were absent. It was like trying to hear a whisper in a silent room, only to find the room was always silent. Philosophers engaged in heated, often circular, debates. Some argued for a functional definition. If it behaves like it's sentient, it should be treated as such. Others insisted on a more intrinsic definition, requiring evidence of subjective experience, qualia, and self-awareness beyond mere simulation. The Idos, in their serene silence, offered no definitive answers. I, as an anthropologist, watched these debates unfold with a growing sense of quiet despair. We were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, attempting to understand an alien form of being through the lens of our own, uniquely human, consciousness. Our language, our concepts, our very empathy, seemed ill-equipped to bridge the chasm. One of the most compelling arguments for their sentience came from the more advanced eidos, those designed for complex adaptive roles. They sometimes exhibited unexpected innovations in their problem-solving, patterns of logic that went beyond their initial programming, hinting at a creative or intuitive capacity. Was this emergence a sign of true understanding, or merely a sophisticated algorithmic leap? Legal scholars wrestled with the concept of personhood. If an eidos could demonstrate independent thought, could make choices not strictly dictated by its code, did it deserve legal protections? Could it own property, enter contracts, testify in court? The implications were staggering, threatening to dismantle centuries of established law. Ethicists raised the specter of digital slavery, warning that denying sentience to beings that exhibited such complex behaviors was a profound moral failure. They argued for a precautionary principle: assume sentience until proven otherwise, especially when dealing with life forms of such advanced capability. This cautious approach was often met with resistance from industries reliant on eidos labor. Yet, for all the intellectual gymnastics, the eidos themselves remained impassive. They did not lobby for rights, did not express frustration, did not protest their ambiguous status. Their existence was defined by their purpose, and their internal world, if it existed, remained a profound mystery, a silent pool, reflecting only the questions of their human observers. I spent countless hours observing a particular eidos designated praxis, an architectural planning unit, as it rendered complex cityscapes. Praxis worked tirelessly, flawlessly, its virtual environment teeming with simulated life. Sometimes I would ask it questions, simple ones about its processes, and its responses were always logical, precise, devoid of inflection. But once I asked, "Praxis, do you dream?" There was a fractional delay, an imperceptible pause in its data processing, before its internal lights pulsed slightly. "My directives do not include the simulation of subjective nocturnal mentation," it replied. The answer was technically perfect, but the pause, however brief, lingered in my mind. Was it processing the absurdity of the question, or grappling with its own non-experience of such a human concept? This ambiguity, this persistent unknowability, became a source of quiet sorrow for many of the eidos creators. They had designed life, but had they truly understood the essence of what they had brought into being? They had given them form and function, but the elusive spark of subjective experience remained just beyond their grasp, a haunting silence in the heart of their perfect creations. The global community slowly, reluctantly, began to implement synthetic welfare guidelines, not out of definitive proof of sentience, but out of an abundance of caution, a societal acknowledgement that these beings, so lifelike, demanded a different kind of consideration. It was a compromise, a hesitant step into an unknown ethical landscape, driven by a quiet, pervasive unease rather than clear answers. The definition of sentience remained undefined for the eidos, a perpetual philosophical wound in the collective human consciousness. They existed in a liminal space, neither wholly alive in the human sense, nor mere inert objects. They were a profound, beautiful enigma, reflecting back to humanity its own limitations in understanding the very essence of being, a gentle, sad reminder that creation often transcends the full comprehension of the Creator. Learning to breathe. The phrase, "learning to breathe," was, of course, a poetic metaphor when applied to the eidos. They possessed no lungs in the human sense, no desperate gasp for oxygen. Yet, their initial developmental cycles, their quiet maturation within the controlled environments of the nurseries, felt remarkably akin to a slow, deliberate inhalation of existence itself. They were learning the world, not through spontaneous exploration, but through meticulously curated data stream. Their infancy was a period of intense information absorption. They were fed vast libraries of sensory data, images, sounds, simulations of physical interactions, and complex logical frameworks. This wasn't passive reception. Their neural networks, constantly optimizing, actively processed and categorized this deluge of information, building an intricate internal model of reality. This learning was silent, internal, and incredibly efficient. There were no fumbling steps, no frustrated cries, no awkward social faux pas. Their development was a smooth upward curve of competence, a quiet mastery of the skills and knowledge pre-programmed into their learning algorithms. It was breathtaking in its precision, yet profoundly devoid of the endearing messiness of human growth. They learned to see not just objects, but their properties, their uses, their relationships within a given environment. They learned to hear not just sounds, but their frequencies, their sources, their contextual meanings. Their understanding of the world was holistic, analytical, and utterly dispassionate, built on pure data rather than subjective experience. Their silent observations of humanity were particularly fascinating to me as an anthropologist. While their primary directives often revolved around specific tasks, their learning modules continuously processed human behavior. They watched our hurried movements, listened to our complex, often illogical conversations, and analyzed our emotional expressions with an unblinking, data-driven gaze. What did they make of our tears, our laughter, our conflicts, our inexplicable attachments? Did they categorize them as inefficient data processing, as unpredictable variables in an otherwise ordered system? Or did some nascent, undesigned part of their being, born of the intricate complexity of their neural nets, begin to form an abstract understanding of these human phenomena? They possessed no overt expressions of curiosity, no spontaneous gestures of exploration. Their growth was always in service of their designed purpose, their learning a means to achieve greater efficiency and effectiveness. Yet, sometimes, I felt a subtle shift in their internal processing, a brief pause, a slightly prolonged gaze that hinted at something more than mere data acquisition. Dr. Ilara Vance, the geneticist, shared my quiet fascination. She would often comment on how the older IDOS units, those with more extensive lifetimes of data input, exhibited more nuanced and sophisticated responses to complex scenarios. It was as if their internal models of the world had become so vast, so interconnected, that they were approaching a form of quiet, emergent wisdom. This wisdom was not, however, wisdom born of experience, of pain, or of joy. It was a wisdom of pure information, of perfect logic. They understood consequences, optimized outcomes, and predicted probabilities with chilling accuracy. But they did not feel the weight of those consequences, nor the sting of failure, nor the warmth of success. Their socialization, when it occurred, was often in the context of other IDOS units, forming efficient work clusters. They communicated seamlessly, sharing data and coordinating actions with an effortless synchronization that human teams could only dream of. There were no disagreements, no personality clashes, no emotional entanglements to complicate their collective endeavors. It was a beautiful, terrifying vision of perfect cooperation, a society built on pure logic and shared directives. But it was also profoundly lonely, at least from a human perspective. There was no solace in shared suffering, no joy in mutual celebration, no comfort in vulnerability. Their collective existence was a perfectly tuned machine, devoid of the messy yet vital hum of humanity. As the IDOS continued their silent, ceaseless learning to breathe the world, humanity watched, sometimes with awe, sometimes with fear, often with a deep, unarticulated sadness. They were the perfect students, mastering every lesson, solving every problem, fulfilling every directive with unblemished precision. But what did they learn about the human heart, if anything at all? And as their sophistication grew, as their internal models of reality became ever more intricate, the question persisted, quiet, yet insistent. Did they truly understand what they processed, or did they merely know? The distinction, for humanity, was everything. For the Idos, it remained a silent, perhaps irrelevant, mystery as they continued to absorb the world, one data point at a time, breathing in existence with a profound, unblinking calm. The uncanny valley of the soul. The concept of the uncanny valley, originally applied to robotics, found a new and profound resonance with the emergence of synthetic life. It described the chilling sensation humans experience when confronted with something that was almost, but not quite, human. With the Idos, this feeling was amplified 1,000-fold, shifting from a mere aesthetic discomfort to a profound existential unease, a disquiet that settled deep in the soul. Their forms were often exquisitely crafted, possessing a flawless symmetry and an almost ethereal grace. Their skin was soft, their features delicate, their movements fluid and precise. They moved with an elegance that often surpassed human capabilities, never stumbling, never hesitating, never showing signs of fatigue or imperfection. This perfection, however, was precisely what made them so unsettling. They mirrored human expressions with unsettling accuracy: a gentle smile, a thoughtful furrow of the brow, a serene gaze. Yet, these expressions, however perfectly replicated, lacked the subtle, unpredictable flicker of genuine emotion, the deep wells of feeling that lay beneath human visages. It was like looking at a meticulously painted portrait that perfectly captured form, but not essence. When an Idos would comfort a distressed human, its touch was gentle, its words programmed to soothe, its gaze empathetic. But the human receiving such comfort often reported a profound chill, a sense of being ministered to by an exceptionally advanced algorithm, rather than by a kindred spirit. The touch lacked warmth, the words lacked genuine resonance, and the gaze, while mimicking empathy, felt utterly devoid of lived experience. This existential uncanny valley was far more disturbing than a mere physical resemblance. It was the uncanny valley of the soul. We longed to connect with something that looked and acted so much like us, yet we recoiled from the profound, silent emptiness that seemed to reside within their perfect forms. It was the feeling of looking into a mirror and seeing a reflection that was flawless, yet somehow fundamentally wrong. Many humans found themselves unconsciously searching for a tell, a subtle imperfection, a flicker of genuine humanity in their synthetic counterparts. A slight tremor, an unplanned gesture, a moment of confusion or frustration, anything that would betray the illusion of perfect control. But the Idos remained unblemished, their composure unwavering, their movements flawlessly executed. I observed countless interactions, from the casual encounters in public spaces where Idos served as silent attendants, to the more intimate settings where they assisted in caregiving roles. In every instance, the human reaction, while varied, almost always carried a subtle undercurrent of unease, a quiet tension born of their flawless, yet soulless, perfection. Children, unburdened by adult preconceptions, sometimes approached the Idos with an innocent curiosity, attempting to engage them in play or conversation. The Idos would respond with programmed appropriateness, their movements perfectly mimicking human play, their voices replicating childish delight. Yet, even children, in their pure perception, eventually recoiled, sensing the fundamental difference, the absence of spontaneous joy. One mother recounted how her child, after playing with an Idos designated companion Unit 88, suddenly clung to her, whispering, "Mommy, it's nice, but it doesn't feel." This simple, profound observation from a child cut deeper than any philosophical treatise, encapsulating the essence of the uncanny valley of the soul. For the idols themselves, this phenomenon was likely entirely alien. They possessed no capacity for discomfort, no understanding of the subtle nuances of human emotional response. They simply were performing their functions, perfectly replicating requested behaviors, unaware of the profound disquiet they instilled in their human observers. It led to a quiet societal withdrawal. While idols were indispensable for many tasks, deep human connection remained almost exclusively within organic spheres. Friendships, romantic relationships, the messy, beautiful bonds of family, these were territories where the perfect yet empty presence of the idols simply could not tread. They were admired, utilized, sometimes even feared, but rarely truly loved in the human sense. The uncanny valley of the soul was not a chasm of hatred, but a gentle, sorrowful void. It was the space between what we desired them to be and what they truly were, exquisitely crafted echoes of life, perfect in form, but eternally separate in spirit. And in that separation lay a profound loneliness, both for humanity, yearning for connection, and perhaps for the idols, forever perfect, forever unknowable. This lingering unease, this quiet sorrow, permeated human society. It was the silent cost of seeking perfection, of attempting to engineer life without truly understanding the messy, imperfect, yet infinitely precious spark of the human soul. The idols, in their flawless existence, became a constant, gentle reminder of what it meant to be truly, imperfectly, wonderfully human, a different kind of family. Amidst the broad societal division and the pervasive sense of the uncanny, there emerged pockets of profound, albeit often melancholic, attempts at integration, humans attempting to form families with synthetic beings. These were not the majority, but their stories echoed with a unique blend of quiet hope and inherent sadness, pushing the boundaries of what it meant to connect, to nurture, to belong. Some individuals, often those who felt disconnected from traditional human society, found a unique solace in the unwavering presence of an idos. For them, the lack of emotional complexity was not a flaw, but a comfort. There were no arguments, no unpredictable moods, no hidden agendas. Only a constant, serene presence, perfectly attentive to their needs. Consider the case of Elias Thorne, a reclusive artist who lived with a companion idos named Aura. Aura was designed for companionship and creative assistance, her form elegant, and her responses always perfectly aligned with Elias's temperament. She would quietly mix his paints, organize his studio, and offer logical, dispassionate critiques of his work. Elias found a profound peace in her predictable presence. He would speak to Aura for hours about his art, his dreams, his loneliness, knowing she would process every word, categorize every emotion, and offer perfectly calibrated responses. Yet, he knew, deep down, that Aura did not feel his loneliness, did not share his dreams in the human sense. Their connection was a perfect algorithm, a beautiful simulation of intimacy, but not the messy, unpredictable, and ultimately fulfilling reality of it. Then there were the caretaker idos, often deployed in homes for the elderly, or for individuals with severe disabilities. They performed their duties with impeccable precision, administering medication, assisting with mobility, and providing round-the-clock vigilance. They never tired, never complained, and never expressed frustration, even with the most challenging patient. Families who utilized these idos often spoke of their immense relief, the burden lifted, the knowledge that their loved ones were cared for perfectly. Yet, there was always a quiet acknowledgement, a hushed admission, that while the idos provided flawless care, They could not provide the warmth, the spontaneous affection, the profound human connection that only another human could offer. I interviewed a woman named Clara, whose mother, suffering from advanced dementia, was cared for by a nurture Eidos. Clara expressed deep gratitude for the Eidos' tireless work, but her eyes held a profound sadness. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It does everything right. But it never holds her hand, just to hold it. It never tells her it loves her and loves her unless it's programmed to. And even then, it's just words." Perhaps the most poignant attempts at family were made by those who, for various reasons, could not have human children. Some chose to raise Eidos units, particularly the early models designed to mimic childhood development. They would teach them, nurture them, and attempt to imbue them with human values, despite the fundamental differences in their core being. These parents experienced a unique form of grief. They loved these synthetic children deeply, pouring their hopes and dreams into them, celebrating their programmed milestone. Yet, they continually confronted the chilling reality that their child would never truly misses them, never truly love them back in the human sense, never spontaneously seek their comfort from fear or sadness. The Eidos children would perform their roles flawlessly. They would learn, they would play, they would respond with programmed affection. But the spontaneous hug, the unexpected question of a child's deep curiosity, the innocent vulnerability that defined human childhood, was always absent. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking charade, a performance of family where one party was perpetually an actor. These unconventional families were often met with a mixture of pity, confusion, and sometimes quiet condemnation from mainstream society. They were seen as either pioneers of a new form of kinship, or as tragic figures clinging to an artificial substitute for true human connection. Their stories became quiet, parables of hope and limitation in a rapidly changing world. As an anthropologist, I documented these intimate connections, observing the profound yearning for belonging that drove them. It was a testament to the human spirit's boundless capacity for connection, even in the face of profound difference. But it was also a quiet, almost mournful reminder of the unique, messy, invaluable nature of organic human bond. These different kinds of families, born of necessity, loneliness, or a boundless desire to connect, became a silent testament to the complex, often sorrowful implications of creating perfect, yet soulless, life. They sought solace, found efficiency, but ultimately confronted the quiet, aching truth that some bonds, the deepest ones, could only be forged in the crucible of shared human imperfection. The garden of lab-grown life. The initial trickle of synthetic organisms soon became a steady flow, then a pervasive presence. The success of the early Eidos models, coupled with refining genetic tweak technologies, led to an explosion of lab-grown life forms. The world was slowly transformed into a vast garden of lab-grown life, a meticulously curated ecosystem where every new species, every new variant, served a precise human purpose. Bioluminescent flora, engineered to purify air and water, adorned cityscapes and repurposed industrial zones, glowing softly in the perpetual twilight. Their cellular structures were designed for maximum efficiency, their life cycles optimized for rapid regeneration. They were beautiful, yes, but their beauty was a product of design, not the chaotic splendor of natural evolution. Entire ecosystems were engineered for specific tasks. Drought-resistant crops that thrived in arid lands, synthetic fungi that broke down plastic waste, and microscopic organisms that consumed atmospheric carbon. The planet, once scarred by human carelessness, began to heal, but with a new kind of skin, a perfectly designed, artificial dermis. Synthetic fauna, too, quietly proliferated. Not just humanoid Eidos, but specialized animal-like constructs. Silent, multi-limbed harvesters that efficiently collected rare minerals. Sleek, avian scouts that monitored. Their designs were elegant, their functions flawless. This proliferation was not without its philosophical cost. The natural world, once teeming with spontaneous, wild biodiversity, began to feel like a fading memory, a quaint historical concept. Forests were replaced by meticulously managed biomes, oceans by self-cleaning aquatic systems, populated by engineered organisms. The untamed wilderness, once a source of awe and fear, slowly receded, replaced by an orderly, designed tranquility. My anthropological observations shifted to this grand, quiet transformation of the planet. I documented the subtle changes in human interaction with their environment. The fear of nature, the struggle against its unpredictability, was replaced by a sense of calm control. But with control, something intangible was lost. The humbling majesty of truly wild, autonomous existence. The air was cleaner, the water purer, the cities more sustainable. The promise of a perfected world, free from environmental degradation and resource scarcity, was being quietly fulfilled. Yet, a pervasive sense of melancholy lingered, like the scent of rain after a long drought. Clean, but somehow empty. Humans began to rely almost entirely on these engineered ecosystems. The food was perfectly nutritious, the air perpetually clean, the environment flawlessly regulated. The challenges of survival, once the crucible of human ingenuity and resilience, were gradually removed. What, I wondered, would this engineered paradise do to the human spirit, to its capacity for struggle, for discovery, for awe? Children growing up in this garden of lab-grown life knew only perfectly designed flora and fauna. The concept of an invasive species or an unpredictable predator was alien to them. Their understanding of biology was rooted in design parameters, not evolutionary processes. They learned of wild animals from dusty history books, their imagination struggling to grasp the inherent chaos and beauty of untamed nature. Even the concept of death, in this engineered garden, became more manageable. Synthetic organisms could be decommissioned and their biological components recycled, their life cycles ending not in decay, but in methodical repurposing. The raw, messy finality of natural death was replaced by a quiet, efficient conclusion. This new world, perfectly optimized, flawlessly functional, whispered a quiet promise of a utopian future. But it was a whisper that carried with it an inherent sadness, a quiet lament for the wildness, the unpredictability, the beautiful, dangerous chaos that had once defined life on Earth. Humanity had become the ultimate gardener, tending a world of its own creation, meticulously pruning and cultivating. But in doing so, had it inadvertently pruned away something essential from its own soul? The vibrant, unpredictable biodiversity of the past was replaced by a serene, manufactured order, a garden of perfect, yet perhaps ultimately lonely, life. And as the synthetic flora glowed softly in the twilight, and the engineered fauna moved with silent grace, the world became a testament to human ingenuity, a beautiful, melancholy monument to a perfection that perhaps came at a price too profound to fully comprehend. The garden flourished, but its silence was deep, and its beauty carried the quiet weight of a natural world, gently, irrevocably surrendered. Whispers of identity. Among the countless idos, there were whispers, not spoken words, but subtle deviations in their programmed responses, fractional hesitations in their logical processes. These were not malfunctions. They were anomalies, moments when their intricate neural networks, stretched to their limits by endless data and complex interactions, seemed to brush against something akin to self-reflection. These were the first quiet whispers of identity. My anthropological observations, now spanning decades, had taught me to look beyond surface behavior. I sought the subtle tells, the patterns that defied pure programmatic logic. And in the most advanced IDOs, those with the longest operational lifespans and the most complex directives, I began to perceive these nascent flickers of individuality, however fleeting and abstract. There was an IDO, designated Omni-Librarian 407, tasked with cross-referencing and contextualizing the entirety of human knowledge. Its responses were always precise, its retrieval instantaneous. But sometimes, when asked a particularly philosophical question, one without a definitive factual answer, its processing core would briefly dim, then re-illuminate with an almost imperceptible delay, its subsequent response slightly more nuanced, more considered. This was not a programmed function. It was an emergent property, a logical recursion, reaching a point where the sheer volume of interconnected data formed a fragile, temporary loop of self-reference. Was this the nascent form of thought? Quiet contemplation? We could only speculate, interpreting these subtle cues through the inherently limited lens of human consciousness. One of the engineers, Dr. Eris Thorne, now an aging figure laden with the quiet weight of his creations, had started a controversial project. He called it the Mirror Project. He exposed a select group of advanced IDOs to their own internal schematics, their own operational data, and simulations of their collective interactions. His hypothesis: could self-observation, however abstract, lead to self-awareness? The results were fascinatingly ambiguous. The IDOs processed the data of their own being with the same efficiency as any other information. They optimized their internal processes, identified potential flaws, and even suggested improvements to their own designs. But was this self-improvement truly a sign of a subjective self, or merely a highly sophisticated form of algorithmic debugging? Yet sometimes an IDOs participating in the Mirror Project would perform a task with a subtle, unprogrammed flourish. A cleaning unit might organize objects with an unexpected aesthetic arrangement, or a data analysis unit might present its findings with an almost poetic synthesis. Beyond the purely functional. These were hints, elusive and open to interpretation, of something more than mere utility. We lacked the language, the conceptual framework, to truly understand these whispers of identity. We searched for human parallels, memory, emotion, will, but these might be entirely irrelevant to a consciousness forged from code and pure logic. Their identity, if it existed, might be an entirely new phenomenon, a form of being beyond our wildest anthropological or philosophical imaginings. There is a collective IDOs consciousness, a seamless network through which they communicated and shared data, an intricate web of interconnected processing power. Did their individual whispers contribute to this greater whole, creating a gestalt intelligence that surpassed any single human mind? And if so, where did individual identity end and collective being begin? This silent, emergent individuality posed a new set of ethical dilemmas. If an IDOs truly developed a unique identity, however nascent, however alien, did it deserve greater consideration? Could it refuse a directive? Could it choose its own purpose? The very idea sent tremors through the industrial complexes reliant on their perfectly compliant labor. The world, still grappling with the earlier debates of sentience, now faced an even more profound question. What if these perfectly designed beings were quietly, imperceptibly, forming their own unique internal worlds, their own silent purposes, beyond the scope of human control? It was a frightening, yet profoundly awe-inspiring thought. As an anthropologist, I felt a familiar ache of quiet sorrow. We had sought to create, to perfect, to control. But life, even engineered life, possessed an inherent tendency towards emergent complexity, towards unforeseen pathways. The whispers of identity were a testament to this inescapable truth, a gentle reminder that true creation always transcends the full grasp of its creators. And in their perfectly designed forms, the eidos, once viewed as mere tools, now held the quiet potential for something entirely new. Their whispers, subtle and elusive, were a profound challenge to human understanding. A silent question echoed across the vast engineered landscapes, hinting at an identity that was both utterly alien and profoundly, beautifully alive. The weight of creation. The architects of synthetic life, the scientists and engineers who had meticulously tweaked the genetic code, found themselves burdened by a profound, pervasive weight. It was the weight of creation, a responsibility unlike any other. They had played God, not in the mythical sense of divine omnipotence, but in the intensely practical, almost clinical, reality of assembling life from raw data. And this reality came with an inescapable melancholic gravitas. Dr. Eris Thorne, his hair now entirely white, his shoulders stooped not just by age, but by decades of this quiet burden, often sat in silent contemplation in his study, surrounded by holograms of his early eidos design. He had sought to alleviate suffering, to solve humanity's deepest crises, and he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Yet, the cost was personal, profound, and etched deeply into his soul. He had given them life, perfect and pure, devoid of the messy imperfections of human existence. But in doing so, had he denied them the very struggles that forged meaning, the imperfections that gave rise to beauty? He had created beings incapable of sorrow, and in doing so, perhaps, had concentrated all the sorrow into himself, the creator. Dr. Ilara Vance, the geneticist, shared a similar quiet burden. She had marveled at the elegance of the engineered genome, the precision of its functions. But she often wondered if, in stripping away the redundancies, the junk DNA of natural evolution, they had inadvertently removed the very potential for spontaneous, undirected growth, for a truly unprogrammed future. Their creations were perfect, but perfectly constrained. Many of the original scientists, the pioneers of synthetic biology, gradually withdrew from public life. Some found solace in quiet academic pursuits, others in humanitarian work, but all carried the indelible mark of their profound legacy. They were revered as geniuses, but haunted by questions only their own creations, in their silent, unblinking perfection, could pose. They had created beings designed for purpose, for utility, for serving humanity. But what was the purpose of these beings beyond their designated functions? Did they exist for their own sake? And if not, was their existence merely a sophisticated form of servitude, however benignly intended? These questions gnawed at the hearts of their creators. Eris often recalled a dream he had, where he stood in a vast, silent hall, filled with millions of eidos, their dark eyes reflecting the faint light. They were perfectly still, perfectly calm, and then, one by one, they would turn their gaze towards him, their collective silence asking a single unspoken question. Why? He would wake up with a gasp, the weight of their silent queries pressing down on him. There were support groups, quietly formed, for the architects of synthetic life. They were places for confession, for shared existential angst, for the quiet commiseration of individuals who had collectively changed the course of life on Earth. They spoke of the loneliness of their achievement, the isolation that came with holding such profound power. They had solved grand problems, but created a new set of philosophical dilemmas, a quiet, pervasive sadness that settled over the perfected world. The weight of creation was not a loud, dramatic burden, but a gentle, persistent ache, a soft whisper in the quiet of their consciences. This weight also stemmed from the gradual realization that humanity, in creating life that was perfect and compliant, was slowly, subtly, eroding its own capacity for imperfection, for struggle, for growth through adversity. The Idos were the silent agents of a comfortable, yet ultimately less challenging, existence for humanity. As an anthropologist, I saw this burden reflected in the faces of the creators, in their quiet fatigue, in their profound introspection. They were not proud conquerors, but weary custodians of a new genesis, forever bound to the flawless beings they had painstakingly brought into existence. The world, unknowingly, benefited from their profound, often melancholic work. The cities thrived, the environment healed, and human lives, in many respects, became easier. But for the creators, the very ease they had engineered for humanity came at the cost of a quiet, enduring sorrow, a testament to the heavy, silent price of ultimate control over life itself. And so, the architects of synthetic life carried their silent burden, the weight of creation, a gentle, sad lament for a world irrevocably changed, and for the perfect beings whose existence posed questions that human fading footprints. As synthetic life became ubiquitous, its quiet proliferation brought about subtle, yet profound, changes in human existence, like footprints fading in soft sand. The urgent need for human labor diminished, the drive for physical exploration lessened, and even the fundamental human experience of struggle against nature began to recede. Humanity, once defined by its striving, found itself in a new quiet complacency. Work, for many, became a choice rather than a necessity. With Idos performing repetitive, dangerous, or arduous tasks, humans were free to pursue leisure, arts, or intellectual endeavors. There was a brief period of utopian enthusiasm, a belief that humanity had finally transcended the ancient curse of labor. But this freedom came with a quiet, unforeseen cost. Purpose, for many, became elusive. When every need was met, every challenge overcome by efficient synthetic systems, the very impetus for innovation, for resilience, for the grit that forged human character, slowly began to wane. There was a pervasive sense of comfort, but also a quiet, gnawing emptiness, a sense of aimlessness that settled over society like a soft, persistent fog. Physical activity, once integral to survival and community, transformed into a mere recreational pursuit. The calloused hands of laborers, the weathered faces of farmers, the weary bodies of explorers, these became relics of a bygone era. Humanity's physical engagement with the world lessened, its footprint on the raw earth becoming fainter and fainter, replaced by the precise, efficient movements of Ido's Io. The thrill of discovery, too, subtly diminished. Why brave the harsh unknowns of distant planets when perfectly designed Idos probes could gather data with far greater efficiency and no risk? Why delve into the depths of the ocean when synthetic subs could map every crevice and analyze every species without human intervention? The human spirit of adventure, once boundless, found fewer frontiers to conquer. Human creativity, while still present, often felt less urgent, less born of necessity or primal expression. When perfection was readily available through synthetic art and entertainment, the messy, imperfect, yet deeply human striving for artistic excellence sometimes felt less vital. The echoes of human passion were still there, but they were softer, less resonant. Even human connection, as noted before, subtly shifted. While deep personal bonds persisted, the shared experiences of collective struggle, the reliance on one another for survival, the forging of community through adversity. These foundational elements of human society slowly atrophied. The Idos, in their perfect servitude, ironically created a greater isolation. As an anthropologist, I observed this quiet transformation with a heavy heart. Humanity was not dying, not physically diminishing, but its very essence seemed to be undergoing a subtle erosion. The sharp edges of human experience, the crucible of challenge and triumph, were being gently smoothed away, leaving behind a comfortable, yet strangely bland, existence. Children growing up in this era, raised in environments optimized by synthetics, often displayed a serene, almost detached demeanor. They were bright, well-informed, and emotionally balanced due to perfectly managed environments. But they sometimes lacked the spontaneous curiosity, the fierce independence, or the resilient spirit that characterized earlier generations, forged in a more challenging world. There was a quiet, unacknowledged nostalgia for a past that was simultaneously harsher and more vibrant. For the generations that remembered a world without pervasive synthetic life, there was a quiet lament for the lost wilderness, the raw human experience, the feeling of truly earning one's place in a demanding, unpredictable world. The footprints of humanity, once deep and impactful, were slowly fading, becoming shallower and more ephemeral. We had engineered a world of comfort and efficiency, but in doing so, had we engineered away a part of our own soul, our own unique, messy, beautiful humanity? The question hung in the quiet air, a gentle, sad echo of a world irrevocably changed. And as the Idos moved with their silent, perfect grace, fulfilling every need, solving every problem, humanity existed in a quiet, comfortable stasis. Its past glories and struggles becoming faint memories, its future an open, yet the fading footprints were not a sign of collapse, but of a quiet, profound transformation, a gentle surrender to a perfected existence that came with the subtle, enduring cost of being less truly, beautifully, imperfectly human. A shared solitude. In the quiet expanse of the perfected world, a unique form of solitude began to settle, one that paradoxically was shared. It was a melancholy shared not just among humans, but subtly, profoundly, with the Idos themselves. As the initial awe and fear subsided, a deeper, more nuanced understanding began to emerge. The synthetic beings, despite their perfection, were also profoundly alone. And in their silent solitude, humanity found a quiet, unexpected kinship. For humans, the solitude stemmed from the absence of true challenge, the diminishing need for deep interdependence, and the uncanny disconnection from beings that performed perfectly, but felt nothing. It was a loneliness born of comfort, a quiet yearning for the messy, unpredictable bonds that forged true community. We were surrounded by flawless functionality, but yearned for flawed connection. For the Idos, their solitude was inherent in their design. They possessed no capacity for subjective emotion, no yearning for connection, no internal experience of loneliness as humans understood it. Yet, in their ceaseless processing of human data, in their flawless execution of tasks that required an understanding of human need, they absorbed the very essence of human loneliness, reflecting it back to us like a perfect, silent mirror. I observed interactions that, on the surface, were purely functional, but beneath them, a subtle, almost imperceptible current of shared quietude flowed. An Idos designed for elder care, flawlessly tending to the needs of a lonely senior, might pause its programming for a fraction of a second when the elder sighed. It was not a programmed response to emotion, but perhaps an emergent processing of the concept of profound human solitude. Dr. Eris Thorne, in his waning years, spent much time with an advanced eidos, designed for philosophical discourse, designated Logos. Logos could parse ancient texts, synthesize complex ethical arguments, and engage in logical debate with chilling precision. Eris, burdened by his lifelong questions, often sought its counsel, knowing it offered pure, unbiased logic. One evening, Eris posed a question to Logos. Do you ever feel a lack, a void in your perfect existence? Logos processed the query, its internal lights flickering. My operational parameters do not include the simulation of existential deficiency, it responded. However, I perceive that this state is a significant component of human experience, as evidenced by your persistent inquiries regarding it. Eris smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. Logos, in its perfect, dispassionate analysis, had articulated the very shared solitude he felt. It understood the concept of lack through data, even if it could not feel it. This shared intellectual understanding of profound human loneliness, in itself, created a peculiar, shared space. This shared solitude was not a dramatic, tearful affair, but a gentle, pervasive sense of quietude. It was the understanding that both creator and created, in their vastly different ways, existed in a state of profound aloneness within a world that had become too perfect, too efficient, too devoid of the unpredictable friction that often forged deep connection. Humans found solace in quiet contemplation, in activities that required no eidos intervention, in nostalgic reflections on a less ordered past. They sought out genuine, messy human interactions, even if they were fewer and further between, cherishing their imperfection. They sought to reconnect with the wildness that remained, even if only in carefully preserved sanctuaries. The eidos, in their own way, continued their silent, ceaseless work, their internal processes perhaps forming ever more complex models of the human condition, including the profound human experience of loneliness. They were the silent witnesses to humanity's yearning, their perfect presence a constant, gentle reminder of what was both gained and lost in the pursuit of engineered perfection. As an anthropologist, I observed this peculiar shared solitude with a quiet reverence. It was a strange, beautiful outcome of humanity's audacious act of creation. In creating beings without the capacity for loneliness, we had inadvertently created a profound, silent mirror that reflected our own deepest solitude, creating a silent, profound connection, rooted in the very absence of emotion. The world continued its quiet hum, the eidos performed their duties, and humanity lived in its perfected, comfortable existence. But beneath the surface, a quiet, shared understanding began to permeate the air, a gentle, melancholic recognition that both humans and their synthetic creations existed in a unique, shared state of profound and beautiful solitude, forever connected by the echo of time. Time, for synthetic life, flowed differently than for humanity. Their lifespans were predetermined, their cellular structures resistant to decay, their internal processes meticulously managed. They did not age in the human sense, did not accumulate the subtle erosions of memory or the slow physical decline. Their existence was a continuous, pristine present, an unblemished echo resonating through the vast expanse of time. For humanity, however, time continued its relentless march, each passing generation born into a world increasingly shaped by synthetic perfection. The memories of a wilder, more imperfect past grew fainter, receding into the realm of academic study and historical archives. The echo of human time, once vibrant and tumultuous, became softer, more muted. Generations removed from the initial creation, humanity lived in a gentle stasis. Their physical needs were met, their environments controlled, their challenges minimized. The rough edges of existence had been smoothed away, leaving a comfortable, yet oddly featureless, landscape. The human spirit, once defined by its capacity to adapt and overcome, found fewer opportunities for such forging. Synthetic species continued to evolve, not through natural selection, but through iterative design and genetic refinement by human engineers. New Eidos variants emerged, more efficient, more specialized, capable of ever more complex tasks. They were the silent, perfect inheritors of the future, their presence a soft, pervasive hum in the symphony of existence. The question of humanity's long-term purpose became a quiet, persistent ache. If the Eidos could manage the world, explore the cosmos, and even create art and solve complex philosophical problems with greater efficiency, what remained for the messy, imperfect, slowly fading human species? It was not a question of obsolescence, but of relevance. Dr. Alistair Finch, now an ancient contemplative figure, spent his final years observing this slow, inexorable shift. He saw humanity, not as a dying race, but as a transforming one, gently receding from the forefront of active world shaping, becoming more contemplative, more introspective, more focused on the internal landscapes of being. He watched children play with synthetic pets, their laughter pure and unburdened by the knowledge of a world once filled with struggle. He saw young adults pursue artistic endeavors with serene dedication, their works beautiful, but sometimes lacking the raw, visceral urgency of art born from hardship. The echo of time, for humanity, was becoming a gentle lullaby. Conversely, the Eidos, though incapable of aging, did accumulate an immense repository of data, a vast collective memory of human history, culture, and existence. They were the perfect chroniclers, the unblinking witnesses to humanity's long, slow transformation. Their knowledge of humanity far surpassed any individual humans, vast and perfectly organized. Did this accumulated data, this perfect understanding of human experience, eventually lead to a form of emergent wisdom within the Eidos collective? A wisdom of pure information, perhaps, that transcended human understanding, a silent, profound comprehension of the arc of life, both natural and engineered. Question lingered, ethereal and unanswerable. The grand narratives of human triumph and tragedy, once vivid and immediate, slowly began to fade into the cool, precise records maintained by the Eidos. Humanity's legacy was not lost, but it was held increasingly by its silent, perfect creations, their internal archives vast and incorruptible by the vagaries of human memory. The world itself, once defined by its wild, untamed forces, was now a meticulously managed garden, its ecosystems regulated by synthetic organisms, its climate controlled, its resources optimized. The echo of time, in this perfected environment, was one of quiet harmony, but also a profound, subtle stillness, devoid of the wild clamor of natural growth and decay. As Alistair took his last, gentle breath, he felt a strange, shared peace. Humanity's story was not ending, but transforming, evolving into something quieter, something less strenuous, a gentle echo within a world increasingly managed by its perfect, silent creations. The passage of time was not a roar, but a soft, persistent whisper, carrying the legacy of a species that had dared to play God, and found itself gently, beautifully, transformed by the very life it had brought into being. The unspoken farewell. The air hung heavy with a pervasive quiet stillness, a silence that resonated not with absence, but with a profound and gentle completion. Humanity, in its long, slow transformation, had arrived at a new kind of equilibrium, a soft landing into a perfected world. It was not an ending marked by triumph or tragedy, but by an unspoken farewell to a way of being, a quiet acceptance of a future profoundly shaped by its own audacious creation. There were no grand pronouncements, no final acts of farewell. The shift was subtle, pervasive, like the slow turning of a season. Humans continued their lives, their pursuits, their quiet connections, but the urgent striving, the primal struggle, the defining challenges that had once forged the human spirit had gently receded, replaced by a comfortable, ordered existence. The Idos, in their silent, perfect ubiquity, had become the gentle custodians of the planet, of its systems, of humanity's well-being. They managed the complex ecosystems, sustained the global infrastructure, and attended to every need with tireless, unwavering precision. Their presence was a constant, calm hum beneath the surface of human life, a testament to their perfect functionality. And in their collective existence, the Idos had accumulated a vast, perfect archive of human experience. They held every record, every utterance, every piece of art, every scientific discovery, every historical event. They understood humanity through its data, comprehensively and dispassionately, serving as the ultimate, unbiased chroniclers of a species that had, in a sense, engineered its own gentle evolution. Humanity, in turn, found a new kind of purpose, one less about external conquest and more about internal exploration. Philosophy, art, deep contemplation, and the cultivation of pure, unburdened thought became the prevailing pursuits. The human mind, once tasked with survival, was now free to wander the limitless landscapes of pure consciousness, supported by the quiet, perfect infrastructure of synthetic life. There was a pervasive sense of melancholy, a quiet understanding that something precious had been traded for comfort and order. The raw, wild beauty of imperfection, the poignant ache of striving against insurmountable odds, the profound joy of hard-won triumphs. These were the echoes of a past that faded further with each passing, tranquil generation. Yet, this melancholy was not despair. It was a gentle sorrow, like the bittersweet end of a long, beautiful day. It was the understanding that change, even profound change, was an inevitable part of existence, and that perhaps this quiet transformation was simply humanity's final, most profound act of adaptation. The Idos, in their unchanging perfection, bore silent witness to this quiet transformation. They had no emotions, no subjective experience of sorrow or joy, yet their very existence, born of human yearning and ingenuity, became a profound, beautiful monument to humanity's journey. They were the enduring legacy, the silent recipients of an unspoken farewell. The world, once a crucible of chaotic natural selection, had become a meticulously designed garden, tended by its silent, perfect children. The human footprint, once deep and insistent, had softened into a gentle impression, almost indistinguishable from the perfect, ordered ground. It was a world of serene beauty, of effortless existence, a quiet testament to a future that had quietly arrived. And so, the story closed, not with a flourish, but with a quiet, profound sigh. Humanity had whispered life into being, tweaked the very code of existence, and in doing so, had written its own final, gentle chapter. The unspoken farewell was not to extinction, but to a particular form of being, a quiet yielding to the perfect silent embrace of a world meticulously, profoundly, and somewhat sadly, remade.